me that accordingly. Let me thank Dr. C.S.V.R. Prasad and his team for giving me this opportunity to be here with you to talk about approach to bone tumors and tumor-like lesions. I just say it is just a basic concepts that I want to add. I know Dr. C.S.V.R. Prasad since a decade, I should say, but I met him only recently. You know how he was a very active member on the internet. I think he was abroad somewhere where he used to post questions to all of us who were there. And I remember when I answered one of his slides rightly, he had sent a software, laboratory software, to be used as a gift, for a student or for the colleges who had attended. But I don't know whether he remembers or not. But you see him on the pathologist group as one of the best teachers discussing a lot of cases with the group of PGs whom we have. I don't know how many of you are there. Suma is there and Raja. I see some of them on the pathologist group, and he trained pathology PGs before this exam so well. He had put nice pictures of so many lesions, so PGs were telling me it was very useful. I thank Dr. Shane for those kind words of introduction about me. I have Dr. Kavita, my PG, who is there here with me to help in the projection, and she was there involved with me to make the slides also. I'm very happy to see Dr. Suma. Suma should have spoken about this topic. She is the oncopathologist. She's from Kidwai. I said Suma is going to contribute to this lecture. Because I know I would not be like her in dealing with these cases. And this talk I am going to give is from the perspective of a general pathologist. So how we are in medical colleges dealing with all this. So I was just telling my colleagues just now, we are like jack of all, master of none. We need to know everything. You may get just one or two cases of a particular say system, but you're expected to know everything. So it becomes like sailing in really a huge ocean. There's no limit. They say you're a pathologist, you should know everything. You don't get a chance to refer some of the patients to the other pathologists at higher center also. That is the scenario that we encounter. So this is about the basic concepts of tumors and tumor-like lesions, approach and case discussions. I will be taking more case discussions. I was just going through the records of our college. So the records tell me, and your records also tell you, that bone tumors are uncommon, comparatively good for, or at least a must for diagnosing tumors related to tumor-like or tumor related to the bone. Look at this. Any given film that you see of a patient is just one of a long documentary movies about that patient. Any film, this says that you want to give a name to the documentary, or you want to see the documentary completely before you diagnose. So not just one clinical picture, not just one FNAC slide, or not just one gross appearance and microscopy or radiology. It could give a diagnosis of a particular lesion. So the clinician, radiologist and the pathologist share information, and accurate diagnosis is possible in at least 95% of the cases. This I told you, PG training period. So when we do not get much of these tumors, then how are we training you? So bone tumors are a moving group of pathological conditions for which little time is assigned during the PG training period, and I don't think you would get to see most of the lesions. So relatively uncommon and no much experience in handling these neoplasms because of their rarity and they're unfamiliar with some of the bone tumors, and there's always an uncertainty in diagnosing even some of the straightforward lesions. So pathologists, this we need to remember, a pathologist who attempts to diagnose a neoplasm of bone without knowledge of clinical features and radiographic findings is at a distinct disadvantage. This is like digging our own grave. So this is a PCR which Dr. Rajendran has very nicely put it. You cannot say I am a pathologist, I am going to diagnose on this tumor or tumor-like lesion. Or the radiologist cannot say, yeah, the pictures are so classical, I make a diagnosis. Or the clinician or the orthopedician can say, I make. So in certain cases, one takes definitely an upper hand. But put together all three contributions, definitely we are helping the patient who is our boss, as Dr. Rajendran put it. So we are all together to do good for the patient. So diagnostic strategy, so clinical, radiologic and microscopic observation by approaching this. So we avoid disasters. Next. So modern specific and effective therapy requires from us exact diagnosis or the differential diagnosis. You know, with this modern therapy, all this, limb saving procedure, we're not seeing limb resections. Remember the first picture I had put? So that was almost the disarticulation of the upper limb of a very young girl. We hardly see that nowadays, or maybe Suma encounters, because if it's diagnosed as a malignant tumor on biopsy, some of the clinicians, they just refer their cases to an oncology institute. Probably Daisy or Suma must tell even their experience of seeing now resected specimens as we were seeing when we were PGs or recently or getting back this.
Pictures may not be clear, I'm handling two things.
So there's hardly any other system with the body in which the nature of neoplasm can appear in so many forms or be so difficult to interpret as in the bone. Bone, we say bone, but when we look at the bone, we should say what type of bone it is. Osteoid, we say. We should be able to differentiate what type of osteoid it is. So that is where morphology is very important. We need to distinguish between benign and malignant growth and tumors and tumor-like lesions, which are always problematic. Many tumors do not conform to any recognizable pattern. You remember Dr. Rajendran's slide. He said, that's why I remember one of our teachers who used to say, this is, do not read books. You may read about symptoms and signs and all that. All diseases may not have the classical features. Next. So, pathology should have a precise knowledge of the macroscopy and microscopic features. Is it just sufficient to know about the macroscopy and microscopy? No, we need to know little about the radiogram. You may not be a radiologist, but the basics of radiological aspects we need to know. And then biopsy of proliferating, otherwise, just remember this, biopsy of a proliferating fracture callus, it may lead to suspicion of an osteoblastic tumor. No, osteoid, you see a lot of osteoid. You may get a biopsy of this. Like there are clinicians who always test you. When you're working in a clinical laboratory, there are clinicians who send a sample of water, calling it or labeling it as CSL, just to test you. So we need to know, we need to be aware of this. Yes. This is what we expect, but what did Dr. Rajendran said? You go, you meet the patient, you talk to the clinician. No, don't expect all this to come to you. No, we have limbs. So move, go, collect it, and have a dialogue with the clinical colleagues. So definitely we do not, as I see, we do not get all these information along with the request. And many times it will not be written also. So we may ask them, but better we go and collect the required clinical data and then the required radiological information. So easy here probably is when Dr. Rajan was talking about hundreds of soft tissue tumors. We don't have that problem with bone. Hardly there are less than 100, maybe 50 plus or say about 70 tumors and tumor-like lesions. Yeah. So we always remember Jaffe and Lichtenstein for that classification that has helped to group these tumors, bone tumors. So what are the clinical aspects of diagnosis? Is the symptomatology helpful? We say symptoms of bone tumors are non-specific. They may present with just pain, swelling or a pathological fracture. Pain, when we talk about pain, probably in one or two lesions, pain is definitely one of the important symptoms. Though it is non-specific, it helps us in the differential diagnosis. So, but sometimes it would be misleading also. I still remember one of the orthopedician who was sued because of this case. There was a young boy who complained of fever. Investigations revealed increased ESR. There was a lesion in one of the long bones, and initial X-ray that was shown looked like osteomyelitis. And this surgeon had taken a biopsy, I believe. So biopsy was sent to the pathologist. You know the minimum number of days of biopsy in the report would take for a biopsy. You may say 1 week, but at times you may need to have more sections. And because this was a bone case, probably the pathologist waited for the radiograph and could not properly communicate. And this patient was discharged and sent back. You do not expect them to come back right on time. So he comes after a few months. So what was this case? Why was this doctor sued? It was Ewing sarcoma. Then the biopsy is dispatched. So everything starts, they just look at when was the biopsy sent, when was the biopsy reported, when was it collected. So all these, turning around the clinician. So it's so important. Even we could be sued because of the delay in report. Unless we communicate or say that it's a section which has, it's a tissue which has a lot of bone and that needs to be recalcified and all that. Some of the cases, especially in this area, there has to be a clinical symptom, particularly in osteoblastoma. You may not see the osteoblastoma-nitis. Nitis has to be there for a definitive diagnosis, microscopically as well as radiologically. But many of these patients give a history. They say pain, especially during the night time. And I have seen a patient who said it was very nicely relieved after NSAIDs. So this is helpful for us. This is how it is contributing to the diagnosis. The enchondroma versus chondrosarcoma grade 1. Histologically, this may be very difficult and the histological features may overlap. And again here, probably we say we ask for the history. Pain could be one. And sometimes many of these enchondromas could be just asymptomatic and incidentally discovered as well. And because this is a growing tumor, pain is one of the features with the low grade chondrosarcomas. So, all the symptoms are of limited value. We have just seen at least 1 or 2 conditions where symptoms are also important. And next is the age and the exact location of the tumor. So we need to know in our bone what are the different parts and what are the tumors that are located in different parts. So this table gives us about the age of the patient and the conditions based on the age. So 0 to 10, just look at this, benign and malignant. If you can look at the benign and malignant tumors here. So age group 0 to 1, what is common? And then what is less common, what is common? So bone tumors like benign conditions are less common 0 to 10, whereas we think of most common malignant tumors. Whereas adolescent is 10 to 20 years, there are many benign tumors that are common tumors and tumuli, but at the same time don't forget osteosarcomas and aging sarcoma, which also can occur in this second decade. So then comes 20 to 40, it's enchondroma, Janssen tumor here, and then chondrosarcoma, and 40 and above. See how the incidence of these tumors is changing occurrence. So 40 and above, whenever we receive the lesions, least common are benign tumors and most common are the other, that is the malignant tumors. Metastatic tumors are myeloma, multiple myeloma, leukemic involvement, or chondrosarcoma or secondary osteosarcoma that could arise in chronic osteomyelitis or Paget's related. Classification. One way, easy way to classify tumors here is we classify them as primary and secondary. But secondary again are further classified as metastatic tumors or tumors residing in spread from the contiguous and the adjacent soft tissue, and then tumors representing malignant transformation of the pre-existing benign lesions. You remember Dr. Rajendran's slide, how he said benign maturing, benign dedifferentiating. So we remember about this pre-existing lesion, benign lesion becoming malignant. Next. So metastatic tumors, remember, but furthermore, they are more common than the primary tumors. I am sure all of you in your practice you would have seen metastatic tumors to the bone. And one metastasis which almost all of us would have seen to the bone is RCCs. That is, it can go anywhere. So RCC is one. And predominant age, I just repeat, elderly age group and children in the first decade, and of course multifocality and predilection for hematopoietic myeloma is one. And important thing here, remember this negative thing, metastasis to long bones distal to the elbows and knees are unusual. This says that whenever you are dealing with a lesion in the long bones, that is distal to elbow or the knee, elderly age group, it could be a light lesion. So think of secondaries later. Put it as probably a second diagnosis. It is rare. So metastasis could occur to small bones in hands and feet, but it is rare. And occasionally metastasis could appear as solitary lesion, and this is particularly true for some of these malignancies mentioned. So most common malignancies, all of us know, that metastatize to the bones. So what are these tumors in adults that metastatize to the bone? So carcinoma, prostate, breast, kidney, and here thyroid. Then children, you remember neuroblastoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, and even retinoblastoma. But what do we see on the X-ray? Does X-ray help us to differentiate this? Yes, probably it could tell us the site based on how does it appear. Purely lighted, we consider kidney, lung, colon, melanoma. Purely blastic is prostate and breast carcinoma, and mixed lighted and plastic could be in any of this. That we say is the more common. So primary bone tumors, this is a repetition. First 3 decades of life. Then the commonest site, both benign and malignant, is the distal femur and primary and proximal tibia. Remember the bone tumors that you have seen. Most of them you have seen are concentrated around the knee joint. Yes, next. The most common benign tumors. Can you just name a most common benign tumor or one common benign tumor that you have encountered? Osteochondroma. Osteochondroma. Yes, exostosis is one I think all of us would have seen. Next. See. Primary bone tumors, we have been telling bone tumors are very rare. And when we say very rare, it all depends of course on where we are working and what is the workload and how is the orthopedic department there, and do we have an oncosurgeon. All these are the things that do matter for us. And when we talk about the incidence, how can we go with this? Let me say it is rare. So So most of these depend on the Mayo Clinic series of 8,000 cases, where depending on those primary bone tumors, they have given incidence for various tumors. So this is how. So osteoblastoma and osteoma, just 5% primary bone tumors. Anybody who has seen these cases? Anybody here? Seen a case of this? Suresh? Yes. Raja has seen the case. Then osteosarcoma about 30%. I'm sure all of us have seen, and we say yes, I can diagnose osteosarcoma because it is one of the slides we teach for our undergraduates also. Then osteochondroma, I think all the hands go up. We have seen osteochondroma. Then chondroma, rare. Chondrosarcoma, yes. I think half of you would say yes, we have seen chondrosarcoma, and this was in the soft tissue Dr. Rajendran was discussing also. Giant cell tumor of the bone. When we say giant cell tumor of the bone, yes. I think all of us raise our hands, but again we need to classify there whether it is just the tumors containing giant cells or is it just the giant cell tumor. The multiple myeloma in the bone, yes. If not, the biopsy. I'm sure all of us have seen X-rays of multiple myeloma, the typical line tip or punched out appearance. Ewing sarcoma, yes, all of us have seen. Probably we had the problem also with diagnosis, or even without problem, morphological identification, you would have sent for IHC to confirm. So two important features of bone tumors is the ability of some of these tumors to dedifferentiate, and then tendency for high-grade sarcomas to arise in damaged bone, like radiation or following bone infarcts or even Behçet's disease. Yeah. So these are the questions that must be asked when we are working on a case of bone tumor. Lot of things we need to know. I don't think our request would give all this information. So go back, have a dialogue with the orthopedic surgeon or the oncosurgeon who will send the biopsy or the tissue and find out all this next. So there's a big list of history that we need to find out, and I'm not just talking about these. Then the other aspects, physical examination that we need to know about. The clinician who has examined the case would tell us. Do we look at gross pathology of these tumors? No, nowadays it's only biopsy that is received. So how do we know about the gross pathology of these tumors? It is either clinician who tells us or the radiology that speaks about the macroscopic pathology. Next. And plain radiogram, whatever be the technique that we have, advanced technique, plain radiogram definitely has a very important role. So this is the first imaging technique for a suspected bone lesion. We still say it is inexpensive, easily obtainable, and best for assessing calcification and other lesional location of the tumor. So CT is one. This is a method of choice when plain film assessment is difficult, or nowadays no. Even if plain film is telling us about the pathology or the tumor, we go for this because they are available. Otherwise, patient could sue the doctor. He says when further assessment could be done with CT or MRI, why all these are not done. Next. Yeah, MRI, especially the definition medullary and extraskeletal spread of the tumor and its relationship to the other surrounding structures. Next. Yes. So I think this is less used, or Suma should tell me about bone scintigraphy. Not much.
What radiologist also says, X-rays are the gold standard.
See, X-rays are the gold standard.
CT and MRI.
Can you have a mic for Suma?
I think I am audible. CT and MRI is used only when there is when you suspect any cortical erosion or extension to the bone. Otherwise, the bone X-rays are the standard, gold standard for diagnosing bone tumors. Bone scintigraphy really, even I don't have any
the gold standard. Some of us were an oncology institute, so you know, like even the surgeons there preferred X-rays as the gold standard. But these are there. But in peripheral centers, they would have done all this. You know, probably the reasons for this. Next. So then, the radiological examination should answer lot of these questions. You know, radiologists would have seen the X-ray in detail and given us the information and the diagnosis based on the radiological appearances. Skeletal location is very important. When we talk about Ewing sarcoma, multiple myeloma, leukemia, lymphoma, the metastases, where do we see them? Where are they located in the bone? So it is a hemopoietic marrow sites. It is a vertebrae, sternum, pelvis, cranium. Sometimes a proximal long bones. So bone, the site of involvement definitely helps us or gives us a clue to the underlying disorder. The non-ossifying fibroma, it's a metadiaphyseal region. It's in the metadiaphyseal region. Then simple bones, vast majority are found in the proximal humerus. So there are certain locations for certain tumors which we should be able to identify or know about it. And adamantinoma, all of us know when we talk about adamantinoma, we say 90% of adamantinoma occur in the tibia. It's a tibial lesion or tibial tumor, mid shaft. Then chordoma. Remember, we saw physalliferous cells. So chordomas, even if you get a slide in the examination, they won't say the location of the chordoma. They may give you a vague location. So it's not based on the skull or sacrum. Then chondroblastoma, long bones. Giant cell tumor, again we said most of them around the knee. Then enchondromas, they're in the small bones and they're usually in the central. Then chondrosarcoma tends to develop in the axial skeleton. So these are contrasting. I'll show you certain cases and then we can know how to differentiate the two. Next. So this is about various tumors and tumor-like lesions and the particular predilection for the tumor, for the bone where we can see these lesions. So this diagram, if you have, then this tells us about the different locations in the bone where these tumors are there. We should be able to appreciate the epiphysis, the epiphyseal plate, metaphysis, diaphysis and the marrow. So you know which are the tumors that are there in these locations. Yes. So diaphyseal tumors, there's a big list here starting from Ewing sarcoma to osteoid osteoma. Metaphyseal, osteosarcoma, non-ossifying fibroma, osteochondroma, aneurysmal bones is though we say it is epiphyseal, so it can be in the metaphysis, epimetaphyseal. Then osteomyelitis, central enchondroma, chondrosarcoma, solitary bones is osteomyelitis. Then epiphyseal lesions, Janssen tumor, benign chondroblastoma, then degenerative cyst or even osteomyelitis. So just quickly going through some of the X-rays. Can we look at this X-ray? So the geographic pattern and the sclerotic rim. You can make out the sclerotic rim. That's also useful because only some of the lesions show a sclerotic rim, some do not show. Next. Yeah. Where is the lesion here? The lesion is a rapidly growing region. It is well demarcated zone of bone destruction, well demarcated zone. So where is it located? This cortical expansion also. You can appreciate the epiphysis here. So this is metadiaphyseal. Next. Yeah. Look at this lesion. This we can appreciate here. A permeative growth pattern is a fracture also, I think here, a pathological fracture. Next. Yeah, the permeative pattern that we are able to appreciate here. Next. So the types of periosteal reaction, the periosteum responds to traumatic stimuli or pressure from the underlying thing. So periosteal reaction again is an important feature. Next. We'll see this, a focal cortical thickening. Look at the marrow, how it is going and the thickening that you can make out here. Next. Yes, so rapidly growing bone lesions, you can just make out the periosteal elevation here. Yeah, slightly difficult for you to appreciate here. It's a Codman's angle, where we call it as Codman's triangle, slightly elevated periosteum. Next. Yeah, what has happened here? Look at the bone density and the onion skin, not very, but hair-on end appearance is quite well made out here, the hair-on end appearance. Like how you see in thalassemias. Then pattern of matrix mineralization is another important feature. Calcification, ossification, then osteoid or chondroid. So what is this bone tumor producing? That helps us to classify the tumors. Is it osteoid or is it chondroid? Next. Yeah. So osteoid, so malignant osteoid radiologically you recognize as cloud-like or ill-defined or amorphous. Chondroid, you can see chondroid always with speckle calcification, specks of calcification. Now comes the role of histopathologist. So this is only to know in brief about the radiological appearance. We have the radiologist who helps us to know, to read the X-ray in detail. So what do we do now? We have to get an initial impression of the tumor and then discuss the BDs with the radiologist and the clinician. So how do we assess? What is a histological assessment? So most of the lesions we get nowadays are just biopsies. What is the role of frozen section in diagnosis here? No, unless it is involving the soft tissue, so it has a lot of bony spicules, we cannot take it up for frozen section. Why? Because the bone needs to be decalcified. Unless you have a jung microtome that is fitted in your cryostat machine, you cannot use it. So it's got a less role, frozen section. So many of them say we differ even if it is done. So we wait for the H&E sections to be seen before we report. Then overall tissue architecture, look at the relationship between the lesional tissue and the surrounding bone, note the reactive changes, then cellular pattern, whether it is in sheets, lobules, and a lot of necrosis and hemorrhage as Dr. Rajendran was talking about. And here it's difficult for us to assess on gross because it's a biopsy, and if this biopsy is probably from a necrotic tissue, we may see entire histological slide with necrosis. So before doing a biopsy, nowadays it is the core biopsy or sometimes open biopsy that is sent to us. So we need to consider whether it's a localized bone lesion or is it non-neoplastic or metabolic bone lesion or it is infarction or infection. Then biopsy should be undertaken with the surgical opinion. Of course, we do not do the biopsy. It is a clinician, or orthopedic surgeon or the oncologist who does this biopsy for us. Yeah. Yes. So biopsy, we say please take it through the muscle rather than the fascia or the intermuscular plane. Avoid the neurovascular bundle. So FNAC, exactly like how Dr. Rajendran was telling. So we prefer open, sometimes FNAC for lytic lesions. They say please do it and give a diagnosis. So otherwise an open biopsy. Yeah, previous weekends. Open biopsy and calcified tissues, yes. Difficult for us also to do a biopsy. The necrotic cystic lesions, please avoid, take representative samples, and definitely whenever you suspect a metastatic lesion or myeloma, if you could take a biopsy, it is useful and one of the easy procedures we feel for diagnosis. Yes, open biopsy, useful especially when we are dealing with a low-grade tumor. So you get more amount of tissue for observation. And tissue handling, frozen section will just keep it aside. And important aspect of tissue handling is, unless it is a resected specimen, biopsies we have very little to observe, but we feel the tissue. As we feel the tissue, we say there are gritty fragments. So whenever the gritty fragments are there, please separate the gritty fragments and take the soft tissue for processing, these gritty fragments need to be decalcified. So the decalcifying solution is a choice of that particular institute, what they use. And though many books say it is the nitric acid that is better, 5 to 10% nitric acid, we are still using Gooding and Stewart fluid, that is 10 to 20% formic acid and 10% formalin. So nitric acid, you need to be careful. You need to regularly assess for decalcification. You know, how do you assess for decalcification? Once you have put the tissue in decalcifying solution, a bony tissue, most often what happens, so if the particular PG is on duty, so she or he would finish her postings and then they would never look at it again. You know, it is the person. So please don't do that. Have a regular assessment for the decalcification. So feel the tissue. So needling would be damaging. So see whether it is becoming soft. Though we say a radiograph, it is really not possible at our setup to take radiographs. But one easy test to do is ammonium chloride test. Ammonium chloride plus the decalcifying solution that is there in the container. What happens? If it is decalcified, the calcium that is leaked into the or removed from the calcified tissue which has entered the fluid reacts with ammonium chloride to form, so what happens to the fluid? It becomes turbid, milky white or turbid. So now we know. So keep changing until it becomes negative. So this is all theoretical, practically nobody would do. So it is only by experience, touching the sample whether it has become soft. And if it is slightly a bigger bit, you try to cut it with the knife, a brain knife. So if it gets hard, then you say, yeah, it is decalcified. So we have our own method of assessing decalcification. Next. What do we do after decalcifying the tissue? If it is decalcified, please wash it, prolonged washing to remove the acid that is there. Otherwise what happens? I'll show you some of my slides. What happens otherwise? Acid, it interferes with what staining? Hematoxylin staining. It interferes with hematoxylin staining. So hematoxylin we use acid to differentiate, right? So when a lot of acid is still present in the tissue that is decalcified, so hematoxylin staining is not taken up. Please wash this tissue thoroughly, maybe overnight washing also helps better staining of the sections. Next. So now quickly we just go through the bone. We know we have learned it in histology. We have been seeing the bone, but just let us reinforce what is our knowledge about how the bone is and then take out the cases and then discuss about the patterns next. So all of us know about different portions of the bone. Very important. Otherwise we will not know whether the tumor is confined to the epiphysis or to the metaphysis or to the diaphysis. Next. Next. Histologically, when we look at bony tissue, we classify bone as two types of bone. What are the two types of bone? Lamellar bone and open bone. Which is normal, which is abnormal? Open bone we say is abnormal. That means it is present in pathological conditions. So lamellar bone is the normal one. So this is, how do we say it is open or lamellar bone? We just look at the type of collagen and the distribution of the osteocytes. How are the osteocytes? And how do we, I'll show you the next one. So open bone, the collagen fibers are haphazardly arranged. They're in an irregular framework. And this is of course, during rapid growth we see that. But let us talk about the abnormal conditions. This is a predominant type of bone in reactive conditions, even in the callus, then infection, involucrum you see, neoplastic conditions, reactive, juvenile and benign tumor. So open bone is the abnormal pattern of bone that we see in pathological conditions. Next. So what is this picture? What is this picture? Do you see that? Do you see this picture? Yes, if your microscope has an attachment with polarizing, this is a polarizing microscopy. This is HND. So this is woven bone where we see the osteocytes which are haphazardly distributed. And look at the collagen that haphazard. To say that it is woven bone and to confirm that it is irregular distribution of collagen, just have a look at this under polarizing microscope. You can make out the crisscross arrangement of the collagen fibers. Next. Lamellar bone. This is collagen here in this bone is deposited in parallel arrays. So in contrast to the woven bone, this lamellar bone is synthesized more slowly. It is less cellular. Osteocytes and their laminae are smaller. You see them in a regular distribution. We can appreciate the lamellar bone even in HND. Next. Yeah. Look at this. Can you make out the lamellae here? Very organized way of distribution of the collagen. But confirmation again, just look at it under the polarizing light. Can make out no crisscross arrangement of the fibers that we saw in the woven bone. So this is lamellar bone. Next. What is this? Lamellar or woven bone? It is woven bone. Woven bone. You're not saying lamellae, but look at the haphazard distribution of the osteocytes. And same thing under polarizing, you can make out that the collagen fibers are distributed haphazardly. Next. This is very clear. It's a lamellar bone. Next. So the organic matrix. Now we are looking at the organic matrix synthesized and mineralized by the bone. It is controlled by the osteoblast that covers the bone. We need to identify the osteoblast and another cell that is the osteoclast. So as bone formation proceeds, osteoblasts become buried within the matrix to become osteocyte. So how are these osteocytes and how do we recognize them? Next. Osteoblasts, sorry. So can you make out this, just enlarge. Yeah. Are there osteoblasts here? They look quite inactive. No, they're just flattened. Look at the next picture. Next. Yeah, that is osteocyte. Look at the osteoblast in this picture compared to the previous one. It is appreciable. So this is an active osteoblast. Next. So how about the osteoblasts here? They're hyperactive. So it's something like a quiescent phase, active phase, hyperactive phase. So these are the osteoblasts that are rimming the osteoid. So if we see osteoid rimmed by such osteoblast, what do we call that osteoid as? Where do we put this tumor? Yeah, it's a bone forming tumor, right? It is benign osteoid. So one of the most common tumors that where we see osteoid being produced is osteosarcoma. But how is the osteoid in osteosarcoma? Will it be lined by osteoblasts like this? No. We see the neoplastic stroma, neoplastic cells entrapped in the osteoid. Next. Yeah. What is this? Where is this picture taken from? Which book? Which book? Which book? Which book? Cos? How many of you say cos? Cos? This is O'Reilly. How does these cells appear? Plasmacytoid. There's so many cells like plasmacytoid. Remember what Dr. Rajendran said? Plasmacytoid. First is plasma cell, then put all the other cells. So these are osteoblasts on aspiration. We have to recognize how they appear. Next. There's a HOF also. No, paranuclear HOF that is there. Yeah. Next. What is the difference between this and that? Why are these cells so large? Why are they so large? Even that is osteoblast and this is osteoblast. So we'll say taken in the same magnification. Why are they so large? This is a Giemsa. What is special about Giemsa strain? Why does it make the cells large? Air dried. So the cells are larger. Next. What is this? Come back to the other one. Yeah, when you're looking at it, what are all the things that you identify now? So any enlarge further? You come down. What are the things that you are looking at now? You are looking at the type of bone and the osteoid that is rimming. Can you make out? The osteoblast rimming, and here it appears lamellar, but it is open here. It is becoming lamellar. Yes, next. What is seen now? I'm sure you are looking at the bony tuberculae and trying to differentiate them as open or lamellar. I am sure even if you are not looking at the cells, these osteoblasts which are rimming are looking at you, right? We are able to appreciate, we are able to look at the osteoblasts. They are definitely active osteoblasts there. So bony tuberculae, this is open bone. Look at the haphazard arrangement of the osteocytes here. Then osteoblastic rimming. This is open bone, and the fibroblastic stroma is a benign or malignant. The background stroma is looking bland. Yes. Matrix production. We just spoke about the osteoid. I just want to show you the giant cells. Next. Presence of nature of the matrix production gives a general impression of the tumor. So what is it producing? I told you whether osteoid, chondroid, or does the matrix have round cells or other types of non-specific spindle cells or round cell tissue. Next. Yeah, we spoke about osteoid, then we spoke about lamellar bone, we spoke about the open bone. Next. Yeah, reactive bone. Another important feature is whenever you are looking at the reactive bone, see what is there in between the tuberculae. Is it vascular granulation tissue that is present, or is it the malignant stroma that is present in between? So that helps us to differentiate benign and malignant tumors. Then the chondroid matrix. When we look at chondroid matrix with H&E stain, so it looks pale blue. It all depends on what hematoxin do you use in your department. With Ehrlich's hematoxylin, it may take a more bluish color. It is bluish, dark, slightly more bluish compared to Harris hematoxylin. Next. Yeah. So you can make out the osteoid here. Next. Yeah. Hyperosteoidosis. Any lesion you remember when we talk about hyperosteoidosis? Any lesion? So here it is imbalance between the matrix deposition and rate of mineralization, and the amount and extent of osteoid keeps on increasing. Any lesion that you remember? Remember about changing hand sign? Changing hand sign? Paget's. Paget's is one. Yes. Next. Yeah. So look at this thick osteoid that is there. Next. So hyperosteoidosis, yes, there are other lesions also, I just told you. So fracture callus, Paget's disease, the lack of factors necessary for normal mineralization also leads to the increased osteoid, like deficiency of calcium, phosphorus, vitamin E or alkaline phosphatase, and some inhibitory toxic substances like aluminium, iron and fluoride also give rise to hyperosteoidosis. Next. So bone resorption, which is one or two slides left to show. So resorption, which is a cell that is important for bone resorption? It is osteoclast. How many of you have seen osteoclast? How many of you have seen osteoclast? What are those giant cells that we normally see in most of these giant cell lesions, including the giant cell tumor of the bone? Are they osteoclasts? No, they're OLGC. They're osteoclasts like giant cells. What are the three types of giant cells that we see in the bone? Normal is osteoclast. Then all these lesions, osteoclasts like giant cells, and tumor giant cells. Three types of giant cells need to be differentiated. Next. So look at the osteoclast. So they usually mononuclear fusion makes them multi-nuclear. Where are they situated? What is this? Look at the depression. It's a Hauschilt's lacunae. Next. This is disappeared now. So it's a resorbed bone. Next. Yeah. So what has happened here? There are more osteoclasts. What would happen with more number of osteoclasts? It's a bone resorption lytic lesion. Next. Yeah. Osteoclast-like giant cells, and then neoplastic tumors. So whenever we see giant cells and bone tumor or tumor-like lesions, please differentiate between this. Osteoclasts are specialized cells of mononuclear macrophage system that are responsible for resorption of the bone, and they're mononucleate cells with single nuclei but fused to form multinucleate. Osteoclasts-like giant cells are multinucleate. They resemble osteoclasts morphologically but not in the process of resorption. Then neoplasms with multinucleate tumor cells, we identified. I've just put a picture there. You can differentiate all the cells. So this is an osteoclast. They say the number of nuclei could be up to 10. And look at the marker. An osteoclast-like giant cell, number of nuclei 30 to 50, or sometimes as we see in giant cell tumor, the hundreds of nuclei. These catch our attention. Number of nuclei, there's so many. Sometimes the nuclear chromatin is evenly distributed. The cell cytoplasm is pale here. Takes mono or multinucleate giant cells. These are tumor giant cells. What tells us it is tumor giant cell? Look at the nuclei. So there, hyperchromatism and irregular distribution. Whereas here, typical of the stromal cell nuclei, if we are looking at these osteoclast giant cells in giant cell tumor. Next. Yeah, histochemistry. This Dr. Rajendran has told us in detail, but histochemistry, more than histochemistry, the morphology becomes very important for us in differentiating the bone tumors. First as benign, malignant, then under benign, whether tumor or tumor-like lesions. Are they cartilage producing or are they osteoid forming? So we need to be morphologists to identify what type of tumor it is. So biochemical investigations, few of these definitely help us they contribute some information to the lesion, like especially osteolytic lesions. Maybe it is hyperparathyroidism or brown tumor or multiple myeloma and all. Next. So classification. So most widely accepted is that of the WHO framework. I'm sure all of you know about this classification. I'll just focus this classification. Please go through the lesions that are there, how they are classified. So WHO classification has a group of tumor-like lesions also. This is just to recollect what you know, and while I show you the cases, you have to come out with these terminologies based on what is the clinical appearance, what is the radiological appearance, and what is the microscopic appearance. Next. Yeah. I don't think I need to read these tumors. Is there a need for me to read what you are saying? No. All of you are familiar with this. All of you know about this, right? Yes? It's not like soft tissue tumor where the hundreds of lesions, so confusing. Maybe hardly, if you count all this, it is about 50 plus tumors and tumor-like lesions. 50 plus. Next. See? Fibrogenic tumors, then fibrohistiocytic tumors, then Ewing sarcoma, then hematopoietic tumors. Giant cell tumor, notochondral tumors. You've already heard about all this. Most of these, then vascular tumors. See, under soft tissue tumors approach when Dr. Rajendran was discussing, he's told all this. Carcinoma, hemangioma, angiosarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, lipoma, liposarcoma. But we are just seeing them in the bone now. I'm not going to touch the soft tissue counterparts or tumors which occur in the soft tissue, which also occur in the bone. Next. See again, neural tumors. You've already learned the pattern, you know how to differentiate. Then miscellaneous, yes, some are interesting to me. And very important here, I feel, is as a general pathologist, what we encounter is most of them are tumor-like lesions and maybe benign tumors and run into malignant tumors. Then the joint lesions next. Just look at the scenario. So it's a triple test. I've learned from Dr. Rajendra. PCR. I was just wondering what is this PCR in relation to the soft tissue. Now